Yes, people, so slightly different video this time around. We're going to be going through, well, I'm going to be going through my own experiences having FAI syndrome and how it was the thing that essentially prompted me to become a hip specialist. So I'm going to give you my personal experience with this one and tell you how I ended up where I am now. So often I do these things like videos and podcasts and recordings and stuff like that. And I say the same joke over and over again. I was never a young kid growing up dreaming of being a hip physio. No one ever does that. But I wanted to do this video to really give you my own different spin on it, because a lot of this content that I put out is to help patients and physios with education and advice and guidance. And this is going to be slightly different because this is going to be my own experience of having FAI syndrome, managing FAI syndrome, having surgery, how it went for me, my own experiences, and really giving you that added layer to understand really what's enabled me to do what I'm doing now. And that was the catalyst of which drove me to become a hip specialist. So I thought you might find it useful. Hopefully you find it useful. And just enjoy watching it. And hopefully it's, normally I put out videos and it's a lot of information and this and that, and this is a little bit more light-hearted, so hopefully you find it useful. So let me get into it. What I want to go through is how it all started for me, right? So historically, I'd always played football. Football is my big passion. I love football, watching it, playing it. I've done it my whole life. And at the time, I was kind of studying, going through university, and obviously was playing football. And this wasn't at the highest level, considering that, this was just like, I was playing a lot of it on the weekends, during the week, as a hobby, but a sport that I enjoyed, a sport that I loved, and something that I did quite a lot of. However, what I remember, and I remember this really vividly, right? So I wasn't a physio at the time. I was still studying, and I just always remembered like that side always felt a bit tight. Like I just always felt like I had a tightness or a stiffness in my groin, and I wasn't really ever sure why. And also, it wasn't a problem, right? So because it wasn't a problem, I never really put much focus on it. I never gave it my attention. I never thought, oh, you know what, what's going on with it? I'm fairly laid back in life in general, so I didn't really let it bother me. But I remember this happened, right? So what happened was, over that period of time where I just always felt like that hip or groin was a little bit tight, I never had pain. And then what happened was, I remember I used to play football, and this is going back, I was probably, I'd say 19 at the time. 18, 19. I played football, and then I would remember, I'd drive home, I'd get out the car, and I'd think, damn it, I've pulled my groin again. And I just noticed that I had this tightness. But again, I wasn't one to really be bothered by things much. I used to just kind of think, it's a bit tight. I'd just let it settle down, a few days, rest. It would just go, and it would do, with kind of the irritability would go down. And then I'd be able to kind of get back to playing sport and playing football. And I just remember that tightness and that pain that I was getting just used to start, I noticed it more and more. I was thinking, that's not normal. It's not normal to have this much pain. But I never really again, it didn't really click that maybe something wasn't quite right. And I remember I used to play it, and I used to play the game, do the training or whatever, struggled a little bit, but still could do it. But then I was limping afterwards. And then it would be tight and painful. And I remember vividly, right? I had a football match, played the football game, came home. I thought, God, I can barely walk from the car to my front door. Now, you think that's not really normal for a 19-year-old. But also I was thinking, back in my mind, maybe you overstretched, maybe you did something, maybe because you didn't warm up properly or whatever. And I thought, okay, maybe that's what it was. And I used to leave it. But again, it used to just gradually settle down. I used to think, okay, it must be something that will just on its own resolve. But it didn't. It didn't settle down. And what was happening was the pain that I was starting to get was then getting worse and worse and worse. And there was a real distinct time as to when things really kind of, so to say, the poop hit the fan. And that's really when things went west. But before I get to that point, I'll just explain kind of some of the things that was going on. Now, at the time, I was training quite a lot, going to the gym, but I never, ever, ever focused on, right, I've got to do hip rehab. That was my biggest mistake. That was cardinal sin 101 that I tell my patients now. I did no physio. I didn't even think to go to see a physio. Bearing in mind I was studying to be a physio at the time. I didn't really think to look into it. Didn't think about it too much. I just thought it was a soft tissue groin strain type injury. So I didn't ever put any focus on trying to rehab it. And then it got to a point where it was actually too bad. I couldn't ignore it. And that's what happened in this like particular event. And by this point, I probably had it on and off with these weird sporadic events, probably for the best part of a year. Now, I will remember this vividly, right? Because it was nothing major. It was nothing kind of big, but I just remember it. So really nice day. This is like my prime favourite weather for football. Dry, cold and bright. Like absolutely like kind of perfect situation for a football match. And I was really excited. It was a Sunday morning, got together with the friends, got together with the team, got to the football pitch, and I was playing up front. So I was kicking off with someone at the time. That's what we, rules will change now, but yeah, two of you centre circle, kicked off, and then I turned to run away. As soon as I turned to run away, I just thought, I have to come off. And I'm talking about seconds. Like, imagine, probably the world's fastest substitution ever. And I just turned around, sprinted away, and I thought, oh, geez, like something just wasn't right. And I couldn't, at that point, I couldn't walk. I was like, I couldn't put any weight on it. And it felt like really deep. It wasn't my groin now. It was like almost this like undercarriage type pain. Also into like pubic region, but real undercarriage of pain and deep in the groin. The classic like C sign in that pain area that you'd get with FAI syndrome. And I was like, geez, I really don't know. What have I done? Like, what have I done? And how am I gonna manage to sort this out? So I thought, I really don't know what I'm going to do. So I kind of had to come off, and I was struggling to walk, and I thought, geez, like something isn't quite right now. And that was the start. I'd had it for a year and a bit at that point, and it got to a point at that stage after then where I was thinking, right, now I am struggling day to day. Struggling to walk, struggling to sit, certainly couldn't run, really couldn't exercise. I was really having to limit what I was doing due to the level of pain that I was in. And that was a prompt. First prompt for me, I was like, right, now I need to figure out what it is that's going on. So luckily I was able to access and had an x-ray done, had an MRI done. And at the time I was studying obviously for physio. And well, actually this was kind of a crossover, because this was a crossover between like studying for like sports science undergrad and physio. I think I get these times muddled up a little bit, but I definitely wasn't near being qualified as a physio yet. And someone who was working as a sports therapist recommended to me, go and see this surgeon in London who kind of works with football players. And I thought that he'll love to see me, absolutely average Sunday league football player, if he deals with professional athletes. But hey ho, I went and saw him, and it was fairly clear cut, kind of quite a big labral tear in FAI, and I can't actually remember the type of different and severity of FAI, unfortunately. I've tried to get the records since then. I've been unable to do so. But I had FAI syndrome, and the plan of action immediately was go for surgery. Now, at that time, I was young, healthy, fit, wanting to train, and couldn't. So the option of having surgery and doing something that's going to resolve it really quickly was really, really appealing to me. So I thought, fine, I'll go for it. I'll go and have the surgery done. That will sort it out. And at that point, I'll be able to hopefully, figure out what it is that I've got to do, or kind of, get on top of it and rehab it afterwards. But unfortunately, that was cardinal sin number 2, because obviously cardinal sin number 1 was I didn't do any exercise, I didn't do any rehab. Cardinal sin number 2, I should say, is that I jumped straight into surgery. So I went for the surgery, and this is when things started to be a big struggle for me. Spoiler alert, the recovery for me took pretty much 2 years, and it was a rubbish 2 years. Now, let me say this first and foremost. I'm a big advocate for surgery, for hip arthroscopy, for FAI syndrome. If you have a great surgeon and the right patient and the physio support is there afterwards, and you're optimizing every level of these kind of selection criteria, then you can be absolutely having a fantastic outcome. But for me, I didn't go about it the right way. I had a great surgeon, And also the physio I was seeing was great, but it wasn't that I was putting my approach like I do now with my patients into managing it, because what I did was make all the mistakes. I had the surgery done and I was back in the gym at the time trying to lift heavy weights within a few weeks. Big mistake. But I didn't really understand the mistakes that I was making. And it was little things now that I tell patients. You know, you think, right, I can go to the gym, I can do upper body. Now, I was doing that. I was putting 30 kilogram dumbbells on my thighs and propping them up to do shoulder press. I'm thinking I'm walking from the dumbbell rack to the bench, carrying these heavy weights. I'm twisting with these heavy weights. I'm doing lat pull down exercises, but my knees are stuck underneath the cushion and they're pushing up. So I was doing quite a lot of things that were loading up the hip without me realizing. I was doing way too much too soon. And interestingly, I had this, and this is, I was never going to miss this, but there was a Champions League final at Wembley, and I was lucky enough to get tickets for it. And I was like, there is no chance in hell that I'm missing Champions League final. And I went on crutches because I was so soon post-op, and I had to walk upstairs into the gods to watch the game. It was not the best time for me, but I wasn't going to miss it. I don't think that helped either. And really what happened was I probably had I remember having a super painful and irritable iliopsoas, because I remember like sitting upright on a chair and I could not lift my leg up. I just didn't have the capacity to flex. I couldn't lift it up. So I was struggling to drive, I was struggling to do stairs, I was struggling to lift my leg up because that iliopsoas was so flared up. And I just remembered I was in pain for a long time. But I'm a fairly kind of stoic bloke. Like I never dwelled on it too much. It never impacted my life, other than it was just annoying and I couldn't train. So whenever someone was saying to me, "Oh, how was it? What are you kind of doing now? How are you kind of getting on?" And it was always a case of, I still can't run. And I couldn't run for about 2 years. I just could not run because it was painful. It would give way. I couldn't load it up. And it was a real nuisance. You got to think, I was like kind of early 20s at that point, and I thought, it's not ideal. So I stopped playing football. And by that point, kind of life changed, grew up and had other responsibilities. It got to a point where I never actually even returned to football. But for me, it was fine. Like my responsibilities changed, and what I wanted, career started to get a bit busier, and things were different. So I was like, fine, that's not a problem. I really got into bodybuilding type training and strength training, and that's like where my passion is now. I love training still, but it's completely different to football from a sport perspective. But those 2 years were a struggle, because it was a lot of stuff that I just found I couldn't do. But also, like, the other thing, cardinal sin number 3, my rehab approach to it afterwards was almost non-existent. And now, knowing what I know now, teaching physios and healthcare practitioners and patients, knowing that we've got such a particular and specific, like, step-by-step, stage-by-stage progression criteria and approach for these patients who are having hip surgery, I couldn't have done it in the more opposite way. So I'm not surprised that my recovery was slow. And I would probably say now, if you said to me like, why, because as of now, I am going to be 38, my hip is great. My hip, albeit it's a bit stiff in some ranges of movement, hasn't been painful since the end of those 2 years. After those 2 years, something just happened, the pain just went. The function started to come back. And ever since then, as of now, I can sprint, I can jog, I can run, I can hike, I can lift heavy weights, deadlift, squat, row, lunge. I've got full function, I've got no pain, it's great. But I do believe that a lot of those changes that helped with the recovery was due to the fact that I couldn't do too much. And then time gradually just enabled it to resolve spontaneously, and the body adapted. And I do notice now, like, I've got a shorter stride length that I've probably adapted to over time. My kind of natural position and hips positions always kind of a bit externally rotated, and that's when I'm standing, when I'm walking. Like, it's always, I have a fairly kind of unique stance, I can tell, but my the hip doesn't hurt, so it doesn't matter because I can train, I can kind of do stuff and play around with my kids and stuff and do whatever I do as a young dad, and it's not a problem at all. So, but, and this is a big but, if you are someone who is considering surgery, you don't need to go through that route because there's a lot of ways that you can optimize your outcomes. Now, it does come down to just understanding and ticking those boxes, because you could be the most willing patient in the world, but you need to have the right team around you to get those outcomes. You need to have the right surgeon, you need to have the right physio and rehab and recovery. And also, knowing what I know about myself, like I don't get stressed, I don't get anxious, luckily, touch wood, but I know that some people do, and actually sometimes that affects recovery. That can impact rehab. And you know, if you're super analytical, super critical and hyper aware of all these different things that you feel, it sometimes can slow recovery down. And I was never one to really be like that. I just kind of like, as our Arsenal boss Mikel Arteta says, trust the process. I trusted the process. I didn't follow my process. I just trusted the process, and eventually it got better. So that's why I know it can be so successful. I know I'm a big advocate for the right person, that it can be really, really effective. You don't want to jump to it unless you have exhausted all opportunities. And this is kind of where my passion for hips came, because I wasn't a physio at the time. I had no clue what the hell was going on. I didn't know what FAI was. I didn't know why I was having surgery. I didn't know anything about it. So it ignited a little bit of clinical interest. And then what happened is, throughout my career, every bit of learning, studying, research, training, during work and outside of work was about FAI syndrome, FAI syndrome, FAI syndrome. And it still now is FAI syndrome, but I am a hip specialist. And that was the thing that was the kind of interest that ignited the passion that I have now, and why I do this, and why I'm hoping to kind of help as many people as possible. And that's it in a nutshell. And look, I hope you enjoyed listening to it. Definitely comment if you've kind of experienced something similar. You know, sometimes when I'm going through this, people resonate with certain parts of it. So I'm definitely keen to hear from you guys. And thank you for watching it. Yeah, continuing to hopefully build this channel. So like, comment, share, and all of that bloody crap. Oh yeah, and subscribe as well. You've got to do that. Apparently that's pretty important.